My name is Rachel Grant. I'm the woman they whispered about behind closed doors, the one who worked 12-hour days for 9 years and still wasn't safe from the oldest insult in the book. And this is the story of the night it all cracked open, starting with one whisper that shattered everything I'd built. It was a gala, one of those over-decorated industry events with crystal chandeliers, past hors d'oeuvres, and expensive suits pretending to be casual. I wasn't even supposed to be serving drinks, but our director had suggested I take the lead with new international clients, and somehow that translated to playing hostess while the men talked strategy. As I approached the group with a tray in hand, I heard him. He didn't yell, didn't even look at me, but his voice carried just enough for me to catch every word. She slept her way up. My director, Mason Huxley, said it like he was sharing a secret joke with the group of clients around him. They laughed lightly, almost politely, unsure of whether they should. My hand tightened around the stem of a champagne flute. I felt the glass shift slightly on the tray, catching just before it tipped. My heart didn't just sink. It slammed into the pit of my stomach like a rock. I stood there half a step away, completely exposed. 7 years of pulling dying accounts back from the brink. Nights spent analyzing market data while everyone else went home. Dozens of client wins, including 3 that had doubled the company's annual revenue. And just like that, he reduced it all to a whisper. I saw the shift in the clients' eyes as they glanced at me, curiosity edged with doubt, already reconsidering what they thought they knew. I froze. I wanted to scream, to throw the champagne in his face, to walk out. Instead, I kept my posture perfect and walked straight through them, pretending not to have heard. Inside, though, I was unraveling. The air felt thin, like the room was closing in on me, and the sound of clinking glasses became distant, as if I'd slipped underwater. I thought about confronting him, but I knew Mason. He'd deflect, gaslight, maybe even laugh, and worse, he'd use my anger as proof that I was too emotional for leadership. I knew how the game was played. I just didn't know how to win when the rules were this rigged. I was still deciding what to do when it happened. The ballroom doors opened. A hush moved through the room like a ripple. People turned slowly, curiosity giving way to recognition. And then I saw him. My husband, Federal Judge Daniel Grant, standing at the entrance in a perfectly tailored black suit, looking like the law itself had just walked in. He scanned the room once before finding me. Our eyes met. I hadn't expected him to arrive that early, and for a second I panicked. This wasn't part of the plan. We'd agreed to keep our marriage private for years. Ever since his appointment to the federal bench, we kept our worlds separate. No photos, no professional crossovers, not even hints at company events. The risk of perceived favoritism or conflict was too high. But he'd come. He'd come for me. Conversations slowed to a murmur as he made his way across the ballroom. Not fast, not theatrical, just steady and sure. Like he belonged in any room he entered. People whispered his name. Some froze mid-sentence. Mason Huxley, for the first time in years, looked genuinely confused. Daniel reached me and didn't hesitate. He touched my elbow gently, then said, loud enough for those nearest to hear, "Sorry I'm late." Traffic was a nightmare. Then he added casually but deliberately, "You look beautiful tonight. I'm lucky to be your husband." The word landed like a lightning bolt. Husband. The air snapped. I saw the realization dawn across faces like a domino line toppling. Mason's expression twisted from smug to ashen. He understood. The woman he'd spent months trying to undermine in whispers was married to someone with enough power to turn those whispers into legal consequences. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Daniel turned to the group of clients still standing with Mason and extended his hand. "I'd love to meet the people my wife has been working so hard to support." His tone was polite, his smile even, but it was clear this wasn't just a social call. And just like that, everything began to shift. Not because I fought back, but because the truth, when delivered at the right moment, has a way of burning through lies like dry leaves. That night, one whisper almost destroyed me. But my story didn't end there. It was only the beginning. Most people assumed I was lucky, that I'd just landed in the right place at the right time. They didn't see the weekends sacrifice the flights taken on red-eye schedules or the endless revisions of strategy decks long after the office lights had gone dark. I joined Ellison and Carrington as an entry-level strategist when I was 24. The firm was smaller back then, focused mostly on regional accounts and legacy clients. Within a year, I'd found a gap in our competitor analysis system that helped us pivot one struggling account into a top 3 client for the quarter. I didn't ask for credit. I documented everything, sent my notes to the team lead, and kept my head down. It became a pattern. I'd spot inefficiencies others missed, fix them quietly, and let the results speak for themselves. By the end of my 3rd year, I was leading my own client portfolio. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was impactful. I focused on long-term growth strategies built around behavioral analytics and sustainable projections. While others chased quarterly spikes, I helped clients plan for 5-year success curves. That earned us repeat contracts, and it earned me respect, at least in numbers. Outside work, I lived with the same discipline. I kept my circle small. I didn't attend every company social or join the leadership retreats unless necessary. When I met Daniel during a policy panel at Columbia, we were both finishing graduate programs. He was studying constitutional law, and I was studying economic systems. We debated once on opposite sides of a tax reform argument. He disagreed with me so completely and so respectfully, I knew I'd never forget him. We were married the following spring, quietly, just us and 6 close friends at City Hall. We agreed early that our careers needed space to grow independently, not because we were hiding, but because we didn't want to invite assumptions. When Daniel was nominated for a federal judgeship, we had a real conversation about what that meant. We chose privacy, not secrecy. I went back to work the next morning and didn't mention the news to anyone, not even during the champagne toast in the office for landing the Arden Pharma contract that same week. That contract wasn't luck. It was 6 months of late-night planning and market realignment. My strategy focused on reputation rebuilding after their product recall disaster. We built a consumer trust model that became the industry standard the following year, but that was just one win. There were others. By year 6, I was the 2nd highest performing strategist in the firm. Still, I wasn't loud about it. I never believed achievement had to announce itself with a megaphone. Quiet consistency was more effective. My methods were data-heavy, but I never relied solely on numbers. I talked to people. I listened. I built human-centered frameworks that actually fit the organizations we advised. By the time I turned 33, I was managing 8 active accounts, 5 of them Fortune 500s. I had trained 2 junior strategists who now led their own teams. My clients sent holiday cards, not just contracts. My inbox was full of testimonials and thank yous. I had built a reputation for trustworthiness and discretion. Both are rare in our line of work. I never brought Daniel to any professional functions. He never offered. We kept our lanes clean. It wasn't about shame, it was about integrity. I knew how easily people connected dots that weren't there. I also knew how hard it was to undo a tainted perception once planted. So I worked. I worked harder than anyone. And I stayed silent about what I was building. Not because I had to, but because I believed that when the foundation is strong enough, you don't need to shout. It will hold. That was the world I operated in, until someone decided to chip at that foundation with a whisper. And suddenly, all that silence became a weapon used against me. It started small, which made it harder to name at first. A meeting rescheduled without me, a thread of emails where my name had been left off. A client I'd worked with for years was suddenly reassigned to someone with half the experience and none of the context. When I asked Mason, our director, about the changes, he smiled like I was imagining things. He said I was taking it too personally, that it was part of restructuring, that we all had to be flexible. But I knew better. Patterns don't lie. And this wasn't a one-off. I'd hear him behind closed doors, his voice low and deliberate, always just enough volume to be heard if you were listening. Sometimes he'd question my judgment in front of others, with a tone that sounded polite but left a mark. Sometimes he'd crack jokes at my expense, never crude, just sharp enough to undercut me, the kind that stays with you for hours afterward, even if no one else seemed to notice. The real damage came in whispers. I didn't hear the first one directly. It came through a co-worker who looked pale when she pulled me aside. "Mason said you had dinner with the CEO of Lark and Vine." Alone. Late. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just politics. It was personal. From there, the insinuations grew. That I had a pattern. That I had relationships. That my success came too easily to be earned. I'd worked a decade to build a reputation, and in less than a month, Mason had seeded doubt in every hallway. I became the story people told behind their coffee cups. I wanted to confront him, but I knew how he operated. A confrontation would make me look defensive, unstable, maybe even guilty, so I stayed quiet. But I started documenting everything. Times, dates, who said what changed after every exclusion, every redirect, every time my work was credited to someone else. I created a timeline so clean a lawyer would cry tears of joy. I didn't cry, not yet. I stayed composed. I smiled at meetings, hit deadlines, and exceeded targets, but inside I was burning. I knew what he was doing. And I knew it wouldn't stop until I found a way to end it without destroying myself in the process. I didn't plan to tell him. Daniel had enough pressure carrying the weight of his court and the constant scrutiny that came with it. I didn't want to add my workplace drama to his plate or risk pulling him into something ugly and unwinnable. But one evening, after another long day filled with silence that cut deeper than any words, I came home and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at a spreadsheet I'd memorized hours ago. Daniel walked in, loosened his tie, kissed the top of my head, and asked if I wanted tea. I didn't answer. He watched me quietly, then pulled out the chair beside me. I kept looking at the screen because I knew that if I met his eyes, I would break. My voice cracked before the first full sentence even made it out. I told him everything. Not just the rumors, but the exclusions, the erasures, the moments I'd swallowed down humiliation for the sake of professionalism. I told him about Mason, about the whispers, about the way the firm's culture had slowly turned into a cage with no walls. I didn't need comfort. I needed him to understand why I hadn't said anything sooner. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, he didn't offer sympathy. He asked a single question. "When is the next company event?" I blinked. "The gala, next Thursday." He nodded. "Then I'll come with you." I reminded him we'd agreed to stay separate publicly, that it could cause problems. He reached for my hand. "Some things are bigger than appearances, and I won't let you face this alone." His voice was quiet, but it steadied something in me that had been shaking for weeks. The ballroom sparkled with artificial charm, crystal lighting, muted laughter, the hum of surface-level conversation. I had just spent 30 minutes guiding a group of international clients through introductions and product strategy pitches, carefully composed, even as the weight of Mason's proximity sat heavy on my back. He slid beside me, smooth as always, and leaned in with that rehearsed tone he reserved for manipulation. "Let me take over from here. The CEO wants a word with you about Q3. I smiled politely, even though I had just spoken to the CEO 10 minutes earlier. I stepped aside not because I believed him, but because I needed to see it happen. From across the room, I watched him pivot toward the clients. His voice dropped, his posture shifted, and the familiar huddle formed. I didn't need to hear what he was saying. The looks on their faces told me everything. The same pattern, the same implication, the same rehearsed poison. Then the doors opened. It was subtle at first, a few heads turning conversations, stuttering mid-word. Daniel entered not like someone interrupting a room, but like someone the room instinctively made space for. His presence didn't demand attention. It commanded it. He wore a simple black suit, no flashy detail, just gravitas in motion. His eyes found mine, and that was it. I walked toward him slowly. deliberately knowing every step was being measured by people who thought they already knew who I was. Mason's expression twisted in confusion, then suspicion, then something close to dread. Daniel reached me, gently touched my waist, and turned to the group. "I'm sorry I'm late. I heard there were some important introductions to be made." Then with perfect clarity, he added, "I never miss a chance to support my wife." That word hit like a lightning strike. Wife. The silence was thick. Expressions changed in real time. The clients looked from Daniel to me, then back to Mason. Calculations unfolded behind every blink. Mason's lips parted, but no words came. His color drained with each passing second. Daniel extended his hand to the group, calm and steady. "I've heard so much about the work my wife has been doing here. It's remarkable." His emphasis was intentional, not just strategic, it was surgical. Mason took a half step back. No one followed. The people he had been charming just moments ago were now inching away. And I stood there watching him unravel. For the first time, he was the one exposed, not me. And the moment tasted like justice. Cold, precise, and long overdue. Mason didn't crumble, not completely. He blinked hard, then straightened his shoulders like he was recovering from a punch no one else had seen land. He cleared his throat, smiled too widely, and turned to the clients with that easy voice he used when he wanted to control the room. "Since we're all being so transparent tonight, there's one more thing I think everyone deserves to see." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. My stomach tightened. He tapped something, then held the screen out to the clients. One by one they looked, and I watched the shift in their faces. From surprise to confusion to restrained judgment. Daniel's hand on my back was steady, but I felt the tension in his posture. I stepped forward and took the phone when it reached me. It was an email thread. The subject line read, "Strategic Partnership, Personal Note." My heart dropped. I knew what it was. I'd seen the real one months ago. In the version Mason showed, it looked like Daniel had contacted the CEO of a major client and asked them to consider working with me. No context, no disclosure, no mention that it was a courtesy message after they'd already been evaluating our proposal. The framing was deliberate, dangerous, and almost convincing. Mason stepped closer, his voice quiet now, but sharp. "I wonder how the ethics board would view a federal judge using his position to land contracts for his wife." The words sliced cleanly. I couldn't breathe. For a second, it felt like everything I had built was about to collapse under the weight of an illusion. Then a new voice broke through. "Excuse me, I think that email belongs to me." Every head turned. Nadia Lynn, the CEO of the company in question, stood near the bar with a glass of water in hand and a calm smile on her face. She walked toward us, unhurried, unbothered. I didn't know she was coming tonight. I doubted Mason did either. She took the phone from me, tapped a few times, and pulled up the original exchange on her own device. She turned it outward for the group to see. The full thread. With timestamps, context, and Daniel's clear statement of transparency. He had identified himself as my husband. Said he was reaching out in a personal capacity, and explicitly stated he understood if they chose not to respond. My response, still there, made it clear they were already considering our firm based on the merit of the proposal alone. Nadia's voice never rose. She didn't accuse. She clarified. Precisely. Firmly. Efficiently. What she said next ended Mason's performance. We selected Rachel because her strategy addressed every flaw in our old model. It had nothing to do with who she married, and everything to do with what she delivered. Mason didn't speak. His mouth opened, then closed. His silence was the most honest thing he'd said all night. And in that silence, the room turned. Toward me, away from him. And the game he thought he was winning was already over. The morning after the gala, I received an email from the firm's CEO. The subject line was polite, almost benign. Request for a conversation. I knew exactly what it meant. When I arrived, the room was already arranged. The CEO, the head of legal, and our HR director sat waiting with tight smiles and clasped hands. Their tone was sympathetic. Their words were measured. They thanked me for my contributions. They acknowledged the unfortunate rumors. Then they offered what they called a solution. A lateral move. Same pay, new title, no client contact. It was framed as protection. Time to let things settle. I was expected to accept it without question, to feel grateful that they weren't firing me. But I saw it for what it was. A quiet dismissal in disguise, a slow fade from relevance. I listened without flinching. Then I asked for a week to consider. I didn't need a week. I needed one night. That night, I pulled out every document I had saved, performance metrics, client reports, emails, praise from executives, internal endorsements, evidence of what I had built, of who I was before Mason Huxley decided to rewrite the story. When Daniel came home, he found the dining table covered in pages. He asked what I was doing. I told him the truth. I'm not taking their offer. I'm building something better. He didn't argue. He sat down beside me and asked what I needed. I told him nothing. This wasn't about him. This was mine to do. The next day, I called Nadia. I didn't ask for a referral or a job. I asked for advice. She invited me to her office. I told her my idea, not with a pitch, but with purpose. I wanted to create a firm built on merit, transparency, and long-term strategy. One that didn't just fix broken systems, but refused to replicate them. She didn't blink. She listened, then said she knew 3 CEOs who'd been searching for exactly that. She handed me their contact details and told me she'd already briefed them about my work. By the end of the week, I had follow-up meetings scheduled with all 3. 2 of them signed preliminary agreements within the month. I reached out to women I had once worked with, the ones who had left quietly after being passed over, disrespected, or erased. I didn't offer them jobs. I offered them a partnership. We didn't want a company with one face at the top. We wanted a collective powered by shared leadership and shared vision. We called it Meridian Strategies. A name that spoke to navigation, to clarity, to a path through the storm. We found office space in a shared workspace hub. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't impressive. But it was ours. Within 3 months, we had 7 founding partners, all women. Each with stories like mine, each with scars from the system, and each with clients willing to follow them into something new. We created more than a company. We created a network, a mentorship initiative for early career women entering strategy and leadership, a funding program for women re-entering the workforce after discrimination or burnout. We built structures we wished had existed for us. Our first external campaign wasn't about selling our services. It was a public announcement of our values. We didn't name names. We didn't attack. We simply told the truth. That women deserve to lead without whispers behind their backs. That results, not rumors, should define success. The response was immediate. Journalists called, clients called. Women we didn't know reached out with stories that mirrored ours. Not all of them joined us, but many asked how they could help. Mason tried to strike back. He filed a complaint claiming I had poached clients and breached a non-compete. But the contracts were clean. The clients had chosen us on their own. And when the board reviewed the timing and the evidence, they decided he wasn't worth the risk. He was quietly terminated. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I just moved forward. Because this was never just about him, or even just about me. It was about rebuilding the industry we loved into something that loved us back. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't surviving. I was leading, on my terms. With people who saw my worth before someone tried to erase it. This wasn't revenge, it was reconstruction, and it was only the beginning. 1 year later, we were back in a ballroom that looked almost identical to the one where it all began. The same soft lighting, the same clink of glasses, the same low hum of industry conversation. But this time, I walked in under a different nameplate. Rachel Grant, founding partner, Meridian Strategies. Daniel stood beside me, no longer just the man I loved, but someone the room acknowledged in full. Our presence didn't make the crowd shift nervously like before. It made them curious, respectful. And for the first time, I wasn't hiding who I was or who I loved. Near the far side of the room, I saw him. Mason. His shoulders hunched, his smile practiced his posture smaller than I remembered. He stood alone, next to a table no one lingered near. I'd heard he'd found a position at a much smaller firm one, without the visibility or reach he once demanded. A step down quietly explained as a career pivot. Our eyes met for just a second. He didn't look angry or defiant. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from long hours, but the kind that comes from losing your grip on something you never thought you'd have to earn. I didn't approach. I didn't speak. I just nodded once, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. Then I turned away. As we walked toward the exit, Daniel slipped his hand into mine. He asked me if it felt satisfying. I thought about it for a moment, then looked back at the space we'd helped shift just by standing in it. No, I said. Not satisfying. But we've started changing things. And for now, that's enough.